Good evening. We are now live streaming. I'd like to call our South Kingstown School Building Committee meeting to order at 6:02. We'll open the meeting with a roll call. Brian Sylvia.
Here.
Bob Littlefield.
Here.
Dave Palazzetti.
Here.
Brian Mahoney is on his way. Kate Massananti, I'm here. Luke Murray. Here. Chip McGarr.
Here.
Michael Pedraza.
Here.
And Jim Manny.
Here.
We also have in the audience, we have Kate Turner from Left Field and team, and along with Kathy and team from Slam Collaborative, and Phil from Studio Jade. All right. Starting off with correspondence from the community, we did have some feedback from a high school teacher regarding the greenhouse that came in as an email, but that has already been part of the discussion through the high school interview process leading up to now. So it really was just keeping our eye on making sure that the greenhouse is included and being contemplated. So I'm going to move along to item new business 3. We have discussion which is related to the Curtis Corner Athletic Field and Stadium update. Actually, I'm going to mush that into new business item 4, which is discussion action high school project status update, because that will be included in that. I'm also at this present moment, I'm actually going to invite Kate Turner on up to the microphone. She is our representative from Left Field, and I'm going to, Kate, let you introduce yourself.
All right, beautiful, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kate Turner from Left Field. I know many of you know my colleague, Chris Spiegel, so I'll be here today talking about Curtis Corner and the high school, where we stand budget-wise, and some of the options we have in front of us tonight. All right, so as we go into tonight, we are going to touch briefly on where we stand with Curtis Corner. We're going to talk about the updates to our current project status as it relates to geothermal, the results we had from the test wells, how we're planning to approach that as part of this project, how we estimated the schematic design drawings for the high school, where the numbers came in, and where some of the solutions are to some of the variances between the budget and where we need to be, where our estimate came in and where we need to be from our budget. We'll touch on our environmental site assessment that's currently ongoing, and then financing and alternative funding opportunities, again, as it relates to the estimate versus budget conversation we'll be talking about. So Curtis Corner is still in development. We have not completed our schematic design. Our target for this budget is $11 million. That is what Curtis Corner will be designed to achieve, is that $11 million budget. We've assigned about $1.5 million to a design and pricing contingency that can look through some of the required scope that may not work within the $11 million. So we've got a bit of a contingency there to address some of those items. As we move into the high school, our budget was $116,266,000. Our initial schematic design estimate, based off all the programming work that's been done to date, was at $133,062,146. So through that process, we did a very thorough estimate reconciliation process. We hired an independent estimator through Studio Jade and Slam, and worked with Gilbane's estimating team, came up with 2 independent estimates, sat in a room for a whole day, talked about unit pricing, talked about quantity of steel tonnage, talked about site work for an entire day, reconciled our estimates, took that information, went through and said, what's the correct way to design this building? We made what you see here, the design and contingency adjustments. So we made refinements to the design that did not impact the program, and we're able to shave $9.5 million off of that overage. Schematic design, you're really taking a very high-level look at a building. So in doing that, there are a lot of assumptions when it comes to both design and estimating. So that exercise really was to refine that number more specifically and align it with what the needs of the high school are. From there, we recognized there was still quite a bit of a delta. We went through and made a comprehensive list of potential cost reduction strategies. That's what we want to focus on tonight, looking at some of the avenues that were reviewed to cut square footage, cut cost, and bring this closer in line with our budget. We included on here another cost, not necessarily a decision that needs to be made today, but I know the town is in conversation with the Union Fire District to waive some of their permit fees, their application review fees, and look at some creative ways of working collaboratively with them to reduce that cost so it's not a burden against the project. So that leaves us at $116.7 million, which we're roughly about $486, about $500,000 shy of our budget. So we'll talk a little bit further in the presentation about how we plan to strategize closing that gap. And then you'll see the last line item we'll touch on throughout the presentation are add alternates. And the way that we approach add alternates is it is a scope of work that is designed within the bid package that when we go out to bid, if there's money available, if additional funding becomes available, if bid results are favorable, it's items that can be added back into the project. And potentially, if contingency funds become available, it can be added in later on in the project as well.
Thank you. I just want to take a pause, and if anybody at the table has any clarifying questions. Dave?
Just curious when you think you'll have the schematic design done for Curtis Corner?
I'm sorry, ask that again?
Curious when you'll have the design done and estimated for Curtis Corner so we know the total budget.
I will defer that to Studio Jade. However, we're looking to target some review of designs within the next few weeks. So I think before the end of the year is around the target for getting those documents pulled together.
Including the cost estimate for that? All right, great.
Just a clarifying comment, because you're saying the net deficit is 486, right? But in reality, that's more like 6.7 million because we're going to be reviewing potential cost reductions,
Yes.
right? So we're not there yet.
Correct.
If we accepted everything you're presenting tonight, then we would be taking that $6.2 million off, correct?
That's correct.
All
So
right.
that deficit is only if we do accept everything on the table tonight.
Okay.
That's correct.
I had a meeting today with the Union Fire District chief and the president of the Board of Wardens, and to talk about the potential fee that we could be assessed or that could be waived. So just so you know, the Union Fire District did not come up with that number on their own, that $548,000. It was by state law. They could, and that would be for fees. Application fees, review fees for the fire marshal, and so forth. So we had the conversation today. Luke Murray and I were there, and they're going to the full Board of Wardens to see how much they could reduce that fee, and we'll know within the next month or so.
Anybody else at this point? All right. We can move on.
All right, so at this time, I'll invite Phil Conti up from Studio J to talk a little bit about the current status for the geothermal scope of work for the project.
Thank you, Kate. Good evening, everyone. So right now, for schematic design, we are considering two mechanical systems. One is a geothermal heat pump system, and the other is an air-cooled chiller system. In general, at this particular point of the project, the equipment within the building is relatively the same between both systems. The delta in cost comes between the air-cooled chiller, which is a piece of equipment, and the geothermal well field. That is where the significant cost difference is between the two. Right now, there's about a $2.8 million delta for the geothermal system, which we're attributing to the well field. The pilot study has been completed. It was successful. They were able to reach 800 feet. They were able to test it for conductivity. That information I have in an email right now. The final report I can expect next week with a lot of scientific data that certainly requires a lot more study. But what they have determined is that if we were to try and do 100% of the heating and cooling load for the building, we would need approximately 108 well holes. We simply do not have that much real estate on this campus for that. Additionally, the base estimate that Gilbane used was 40 wells. So then we asked them to look at 50% geothermal to support the heating and cooling loads. The reason why we used 50% was that if the town and the district were to pursue the Inflation Reduction Act, the minimum geothermal loading is 50%. Now, I'm not advocating that you pursue that. We're just saying if you did, you'd have compliance. So the 50% heating and cooling load would yield about 30 wells. So that's less than what we have used in the estimate for geothermal. That is the information that I have to you today. At some point, relatively soon, the decision will have to be made on what system we are pursuing. It's not uncommon for architecture to proceed and MEP to catch up, but we do not want to delay this decision too long. So that's why we have identified one of the value engineering options at $2.8 million to go from geothermal to a heat pump chiller system. Again, this afternoon I just received a life cycle cost analysis that we are starting to develop regarding the geothermal and the heat pump chiller, because that may yield information that makes a different decision that you may feel is worthy. Although the geothermal system has a less maintenance or utility cost over its lifetime, it's just short of being able to close that gap on the initial capital cost. So according to the life cycle cost, a heat pump chiller is the lowest cost option over the life of the building. However, I mentioned that we estimated 40 wells. We need more like 30 wells. That may close this gap to the point where I could come back to you and say, in terms of life cycle cost analysis, a heat pump chiller or a geothermal system is about the same. Then you may decide to make that decision of pursuing a geothermal system. However, recognizing what Kate said is that 2.8 reduction was one of the recommendations to get us to budget. That doesn't mean that there's not other funding sources that the community may pursue to pursue this option and allow it to remain as part of the project. So I want to stop talking because I said a lot, and I'm happy to answer some questions on this topic.
I just want to make one point. For folks hearing 100% and 50% and thinking that's a major reduction, geothermal systems aren't usually built for 100%. You usually build them for about 75, 80. So 50 is not far from target.
So I just want to open this topic up for a full, robust discussion at the table right now, because yes, you shared a lot of information. I understand where we're going with this because I've been part of the conversation, Brian's been part of the conversation to get to this point. So what I would love to do is, with the folks who haven't yet, if you have any clarifying questions or if you have any concerns that you want to bring up now, and then we can kind of hash them out. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure we're clear at this table. This table, and I'm actually glad to see so many town councilors here, this decision will not lay at the school building committee. We may make a recommendation, but at the end of the day, the town has to decide whether or not we're going geothermal, 50% geothermal or 0% geothermal. I just want to make sure that we understand at this table, we can make recommendations and we can give our opinions, but at the end of the day, town council is going to have to make that call.
If the town, if this does go through and it's approved that we do a 50% or even consider it, what is the return on investment? How long would it take us to recoup that money over, say, even a 50-year period for the school? 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, whatever number you feel comfortable with. If we invest that money, when would we break even and possibly go in the black on that?
So I would want to look at the detailed report that is behind this just cover sheet that they sent before I answer that question. But we have that information, so I can provide it.
The hope is that that information will be provided, and we'll get into a little bit more discussion about timing, but we're looking hopefully at the joint session between school committee, town council, which is December 18th, and have all that robust information ahead of time going into that more detailed presentation.
When you talk about the space available for the wells, or is that taking into account the entire campus structure, or is that the campus slated for construction? So when we drill wells, does that make everything that goes over those pits inoperable? So hence we don't have enough because of the footprint that we're limited to, because we have to turn back over the same amount of land? Or is it if we had the entire campus, and does drilling those wells make other parts of the campus unusable for other uses?
So you can use the area over the well field for parking, open fields, whatever. There's certainly a high degree of efficiency in keeping them in the same area. Where we are anticipating them now is to the east of the building, underneath of that parking area. We estimated we could put the 40 there. We certainly could fit the 30 there. To move to over 108 wells, we would end up extending them so far in front of the building, underneath of all of that parking, it just gets completely it's not practical. And if you were to say, well, we'd put them on the hazard field that we're going to turn back over, there's currently a building there. So that land does not become available until the building is demolished, which just doesn't work in the sequence of our project.
Thank you.
So just clarifying, right? This is a cost reduction strategy, right? So this is part of the $6 million overage of our base program.
Correct.
So this is a premium item, and this is why it's going to lay more with council, because it's a financial discussion that needs to be had. I guess what like to better understand, because I'm an HVAC expert, is a lot of this hinges on sustainability, right? We already heard preliminary results that the ROI might be similar or equal. So therefore, that may not be the discussion to be had, which is, we've been hinging, one part of it was financial. Could we make it back and actually be in a better situation operationally over time? It doesn't sound like that may be the case. So then it's the sustainable aspects of the system of an air unit, a traditional air unit, right? More modern heat pump, like we have on the wall right here, versus geothermal. You know, do you have something to lend in that aspect now, or is that something we could hear later? Just try to better understand, like, how much more sustainable is geothermal versus today's traditional heat pump system?
I would like to come back with that sustainable comparison for you.
Okay, fair enough.
I would just like some clarification, just to make sure that I have this correct. So, Philip, do I have this correct, that if we utilized geothermal for 50% of the structure, and then, for lack of a better term, a more traditional system for the other 50%, that the difference, the delta between doing that and doing a 100% traditional system is estimated at 2.8 million?
Yes, and we attribute that delta to really the well field, because for all intent and purpose at this time, the equipment's about the same cost inside the building.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, before we kind of move along, I just want to make sure everybody fully understands that right now this 2.8 million has been reduced, right? So we've removed it to be able to reconcile to the 116. But it sits off to the side because we can put it back with a directive. Like, if we recommend that we move forward with this or not, if we recommend to the town council that we really should move forward with this, it would put the 2.8 million back in, so then we would be 2.8 over budget. But with the part of the discussion that will continue is different ways of funding that. And again, that would it'd be a joint discussion to make sure that we can figure out if there is a proper return on investment, if it's worth doing or not, so that we have all the information that we need to make the best decision we can. So
just two things. So just to clarify, so that the 2.8 million is going with the 40 wells. So we don't know what the delta is if we went to the 30 wells, which is the 50%. Is that
correct?
So the number would come down a little bit.
Correct, but your estimate would also come down a little bit because the estimate was based on 40 wells.
So how does it change the delta?
It doesn't change the delta.
It doesn't change the delta.
The estimate's based on the 40 wells.
Okay. All right, so I mean, I'm not really surprised. Geothermal is really only feasible with the incentives that the government's putting out. So if the town decided to go after the incentives, then this kind of evaporates. Unfortunately, the incentives may also evaporate in about a month. So that's a risk that we have now that we didn't have before November 6th. It is a big decision for the town, so I'll just put it out there. But just to clarify again on, I think, Bob, just, so when they say 50%, it's about the heat load for the building. Mm-hmm. So it's not like half the building is going to be one thing and half the building is the other. It's going to be this, and then they'll augment it with additional heating or cooling for the other.
A hybrid system.
And 100% is the worst day in August with, full humidity, or the coldest day in December, which we don't get anymore, so we don't have to worry about those. So that's why they usually design to about 80% on these systems, because you don't need to drill all those extra wells except for those 2 or 3 days, and you augment it. So that was a long way of saying I think it's still very much on the table, but we have decisions that we have to make, and I think unfortunately we have to be very concerned about the availability of those incentives that we kind of were counting on when we first walked down this road.
I think one other thing I'll mention about the incentive programs is we still have to bond the capital up front, whether it's a federal incentive or incentives through Rhode Island Energy. The upfront capital has to still be accounted for.
I'm just going to point out the obvious. I'll go back to financing, right? So going to what you just said, this is why I think, the building committee is going to have a tough time weighing in on this, because one, I think we're lacking some information, especially tonight, right? We're lacking information on what the benefit is, right? We're responsible to build a building. A school building that operates, that's our core charge, right? This is kind of a little bit outside of that. It's more financial impact operation and maybe more policy related, right? And that falls under the council recommendation on the school committee side. So I'm just pointing out that obvious fact of I don't know if that's going to sit with us ultimately. And things like the incentive strategy, I'd be pointing to Brian and saying, you know, what does the environment look like? You know, how's the financial picture? And I think that's also going to have to come up, and he's going to have to present to council on that.
And I think the intention of tonight and what we want to get out of this information that's being presented, while we don't have a full picture to present tonight, we want to get an appetite for whether the committee and ultimately town council want to continue to pursue implementing geothermal. We understand what the numbers aren't solid yet, the size of the system isn't solid yet, but we want to get a feel for whether there's still an appetite to pursue this, whether we continue to bring this forward to town council for the alternate funding conversation. But it really is to try and see where everybody's priorities lie as well.
Well, and that goes to the other big ticket items that we're gonna navigate through for the rest of this presentation too. So we have some big things to discuss, really.
Right, and it is. I think that the way you said it was perfect. That we want to get the flavor of the field because we don't have all the numbers. We don't have the Curtis Corner numbers. The Curtis Corner could come in $2 million under budget, and then this is not a problem. Curtis Corner could come in $2 million over budget, and then we've got a whole mess of problems. So we really can't have we shouldn't have the decision until we have the total package of all the costs. But my personal, well, I've got the microphone. I think we should continue down this dual path of air source chiller and geothermal until we get a little bit more information. I think we have time to develop it further.
Agreed. And again, this is really helping us prepare for. Well, it's helping them prepare as they continue the design, because they kind of can't really go too far if we don't have that foundational design decided upon, which is why we're now bumping up against kind of that December 18th period to where really kind of where we need to make, as a collective, our community needs to make a decision so that they can proceed, really. Anybody else before we move on to the next topic? Alrighty.
So another value engineering component we have to reduce cost is to change from underground infiltration of stormwater to some above ground retention. And we're targeting about 50% in reduction of underground storage. Now, we're still determining the best locations to do that. We want it to work within the setting. Sometimes these stormwater retention basins can become science components to curriculum and stuff like that. But we're also sensitive to where we would place them, how big they would be. We would estimate the value of this cost reduction to go from 50% above ground from below ground at about $260,000.
Again, just pause and open it up for contemplation, discussion. One of the things that I kind of, as we were just discussing this and vetting it out over the period of past few weeks, the main concern is we have a water problem in our community in general. When we have our big storms, I think we went from, flooding every 50 to 100 years to now every 2 to 3 months. No, I'm kidding. 2 to 3 years of having when we have these big storms, we do have a problem. That area in particular, as we all are familiar with what happens to our lovely Guild property every time a large storm comes through. So we wanted to make sure that regardless of a decision that gets made here, that we are being helpful and not harmful to our community when it comes to water. So I'll let you guys talk to that if you could.
Sure. Given the number of agencies and regulations that the site civil engineer will be going through, we will certainly be improving the current condition. We're not going to make it worse by any means. That does not mean that we will be able to solve every problem that currently exists. We certainly will be not making new problems, but we will be improving existing problems.
I'll also add, just as professional scar tissue over the last 5 years or so, the way that stormwater systems have been historically designed in the last 15, 20 years is no longer adequate for what we're seeing right now. So I'm always a huge advocate for oversizing our stormwater systems on site. You guys know you have a problem. That's part of our geotechnical study and our environmental study, but it needs to be oversized. We need to plan for the future of the way that our communities are changing.
So on that note, does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback for this particular topic?
So I had pushed back a little bit on this, only because I'm not afraid to look at it, right? But I also have a background in design. Just knowing, and even in the town, if you ask the town engineer, the planning team, like private developers have retention basins that are full of trees, trash, et cetera, right? And I know the maintenance is limited. So I think the only ask is when you come back with a more solidified grading plan and looking at it, right? I would point out, we already have some on site. When High Street was built, there was an agreement that we couldn't meet the stormwater requirements, so they went over to the high school. So there's one on the backside of the parking lot. There's some in front of the hazard building. They're indescript. I would guess they are pretty full of debris, right? And not well maintained. So I think they can work, though. I think you just have to deal with the reality. It might be a hybrid design, and maybe looking at that to the lens of future, right? Because best of intentions. And then also things like you're going to get, proximity to neighbors, mosquitoes, things like that may come up. So I just think that we just need to be mindful of that. That's my piece.
We need to be mindful as a community also as far as making sure we maintain our property properly going forward when we're no longer in charge. No. All right, so unless anybody has any comments on this particular slide, we can move along to our next cost reduction strategy.
So with this one, I'll invite Slam up to talk. We've got a couple of structural, architectural elements that impact the building itself. Now that we're on the inside of the building, talking a little bit more specifically as relates to the different programs within the building, their size, location, and orientation. So the first item is relating to the interior of the athletics program, the gymnasium, and how that can be reimagined. So I'll hand it over to Kathy to talk about the details.
Good evening. Kathy Ellithorpe from SLAM, and Jeff Bento was here with me, so if I don't remember everything I'm supposed to say, he'll jump in and help. So if you remember when you saw plans before, there was a walking track on the upper level. This would eliminate the walking track. It would take this space that was adjacent to the walking track, which was a fitness area, and bring it down to the main floor. So the sort of the big blue rectangle that's sticking out the back right now, that would literally be sticking out the back of the building. We would be redesigning this to make it work. That is that component of fitness and weight room brought downstairs. The other thing we looked at is if we were to stretch the bleachers out a little bit longer, we could make them a little bit thinner. We could make the gym a little bit thinner. We could take that storage component that was across the back and pull it in. Likely, as we look at this, we might not need 2 exits going out of the gym in that location. So there's some redesign to be done here. But there was a cost savings of just over $600,000 to eliminate the track and bring that one component downstairs, and then make some other accommodations within the building to retain those components of the program. Are there questions?
Yeah, I think the biggest concern with that is that bump out, because all of a sudden it's not looking particularly good, as well as there's a reason why we had the building flat in terms of we have not a lot of space to work with, as you're well aware. So putting a bump there is, I wonder if we can find another place if we opted to go this route with the removal of the track and the moving of the fitness area downstairs. I'm wondering if we can find a different place to fit it within the structure.
It's something that as we take the items, because there'll be a series of them here that you agree we need to implement, we definitely need to go back and do some redesign. And yeah, that's kind of a big lump on the back of the building, right? Literally, it's in our driveway. If we showed you the site plan right now, we are on that driveway. So
Right.
we'd have to be redoing something.
Yes, because the arrival dismissal was already tight. The parking's really tight, and so I don't think, like you said, putting it in the middle of our driveway is not gonna be ideal.
Now, it may mean that the driveway wiggles or something. I don't know what the solution is, but please don't take these blue boxes that you're going to see
Yeah.
as the answer, because they're not.
I just wanted to raise it as a concern.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I just want to second what Kathy said. These are conceptual ideas of how this would be achieved. This is not by any means the final design. Our next step after tonight is to give direction to the architects to take these concepts and actually lay them out in the floor plan and realize them within the site and within the architecture as to how that building will flow. So it is a very important step as we move into DD, but these are really conceptual, so please keep that in mind as we're going through them.
Thanks.
Just to follow up on that too, because that's a lot of the issues that we have with the current building is just stuff's just put places. Anyone who's walked around the building realizes there's really no flow to anything, and so that's one thing I've really wanted to avoid with this new building is just like, oh, this, we couldn't fit this anywhere, so here it is randomly. Yeah, it doesn't look good from the outside, and it makes no sense on the inside. So I just wanted to really raise that concern.
Yeah, so Terry Lynch, the athletic director, isn't here, but Chip and I chatted with him after we saw these slides, and very reassuring to know that that's not going to look like that. Terry's feedback, I'll speak for him, and Chip, say if I'm not echoing him perfectly, but we are okay with losing the track, understanding it's a very large expense. It is a nice to have. It would have been awesome, but it's very expensive. You got structural concerns and safety concerns and stair towers, et cetera. So it does save a lot of money. I think the thought was possibly to add a outdoor walking track around the hazard field, or at least a path or something like that, if we could do that at a much less cost. Especially with climate change, December you can walk outside now. But I think he was definitely okay with getting rid of the walking track. Stretching the bleachers and making the gym narrower, that's fine. We're not losing capacity or anything like that. Some of the seats on the baseline won't be as good, but it's not the end of the world. But that fitness area is key. It's for the wrestling team. Actually having it on the first floor is a little easier. We had that whole wrestling mat discussion, so this actually improves that. But there needs to be good access so that it can be used while the other gym is in use for wrestling. So that's part of the program that just can't go away. And if Terry was here, he'd be pounding his fist on that one.
Yeah, we actually got kind of excited about this layout because we did have some issues that we ran into, and we were talking, with Terry about the athletics program, about the second floor and the feasibility of wrestling mats and where's the permanent home for them, and are we moving treadmills around, and where are things stored? This is a much better solution to that issue. It may not be in this exact location.
Yeah, first floor is a good solution. This is not a good solution.
Yes, let me clarify. First floor is a good solution. It needs to, the layout needs to work, but the flexibility of that program is much more enhanced having this on the first floor.
And I think to echo Dave and speaking with Terry also was, again, obviously it'll change a little bit, but this echoes what we heard from the community, from Terry, from us internally, that the walking track was great, but where we were going to put wrestling, baseball team that needs some extra space, after school activities that need an extra space. It's not a auxiliary gym like we have now, but a separate space. So I think this does solve a lot of those problems. And even right now, internally between the 5 buildings, with closing Curtis, closing Wakefield, we've had so many local groups that depend on our gymnasiums, because we have one rec facility in town. They're booked up all the time. All of our gym space is booked up. So to have extra space that the youth communities could use in town is even better than, not that I didn't want the walking track, but to add a general multi-purpose space, I think will be helpful long term.
I'm not sad about losing the walking track because I thought that was silly and frivolous. And so when it was, I was like, okay, great, tell the kids to go walk outside. So no, I'm sort of kidding, sort of quite serious. So I again appreciate, especially coming out of the community forum, we did have a couple community members who brought up the concept of safety of kids up above, again, the wrestling program, the mats, everything. So I look forward to seeing the redesign of this, to see how the flow of the building and the traffic and whatnot play out. Anybody else want to weigh in on this?
Will there be an ice rink underneath the basketball court?
Definitely.
The ice rink will be under the pool.
Yes.
Which is under the gym. It's like 3 layers down.
Freeze the pool and you have ice.
Like the Baileys. I just wanted to, Dave brought up a walking track around the field as a solution, and if we don't have money for that, I just want to point out, that is a public facility, right? That's not a school facility, because with that grant, it has to be open public access. So it's a town facility, and it, you know, that could come later. There's grants out there, there's other funding mechanisms, so if we feasibly can't do that, we could plan for it. That's also an alternative.
We could just recruit a couple community partners to just walk around and follow the same path and wear it down for you, Dave. That's a joke.
I know, but no, I think that's an excellent point that Luke made, is you got to plan for it, you got to grade it properly. So that'd be great to do that. And then, yeah, if we could get grant money later to finish it, that'd be awesome.
I was just going to ask if I could, when you were doing your programmatic research and you were talking to the folks at the high school, and the subject of the walking track came up versus an open auxiliary space, where was the walking track in their regard on the list of priorities?
Chip was very vocal that would have been very useful to the athletic program, not the athletic program, but the academic program of being able to let the students walk inside where they could be supervised, but they'd be out of the way of other activities that could be going on in the gym at the same time. So it was purposefully discussed, and it did have an actual function other than, yeah, it would be kind of cool to have. They did have a use for it.
Got it. Okay.
And in addition, too, I would also point out, too, like we talk about wrestling, but indoor track currently runs in the halls of, like, because it's a loop. I mean, like on days where you can't be outside, it's unsafe sometimes in the winter to be outside practicing for track. And so, like, it did have that purpose as well, too. Other schools are using their they call it a walking track, but in reality, if it's cleared out and it's just for your you can run on it as well. So so it did have that safety purpose too. So it's I think, as Dave said, we're okay with it, and I think that's the right word. But understanding about what needs to happen to get to budget.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone further? All right, let's go to the next one. Here we go.
Okay, you want to start?
It's all yours, Kathy.
So another not easy to stomach idea, from the designer's point of view anyway, would be to eliminate the entire upper level that's associated with the balcony and the lobby and the bathrooms and a couple of spaces that would function as part of the auditorium space. It would mean a reduction of 162 seats. That's currently what is scheduled to be up on the mezzanine, or the balcony rather, level. It would leave you the 546 seats that are currently designed on the main level, which is sloped floor and normal, what you expect as an auditorium. By eliminating that entire upper level, we could also eliminate the elevator that's in the upper corner. There was a couple of small bathrooms, single-person bathrooms, that would have also been available to the student and faculty use during the day. But we would not build the stair tower. However, on the first floor, we would retain that area that's got the blue X on it, expand the lobby and some of the multifunction space for people coming in and out of the auditorium. So it was just over almost $550,000 worth of construction as estimated if it is to be removed.
So this one's a tough one. This is definitely a tough one to even contemplate. Which is why we wanted to make sure we brought it to this body. This is not a surprise, however. It has been part of the discussion all along that we were shooting for a larger auditorium, and we knew that it may be pushing our dollars. So we know that this is a place that can be reduced and we could still meet programmatic needs. However, it may not be an ideal reduction space for us. So I'd love to hear what this committee has to say on the topic. I'll kind of reserve my thoughts for the moment, but if anybody wants to share theirs currently, feel free. Nobody has a comment?
What is the capacity of the gymnasium that currently,
in the bleachers, we could seat the entire student body there. 750? Yeah. So you could have your entire student body gather on the bleachers. In the gym, you could get 3/4 in the auditorium if the mezzanine were removed.
Okay, just in the bleachers, so that's not utilizing the floor, the court whatsoever?
Strictly bleachers, if you were to have a, all-school function where you want all the kids in one space. God bless you for bringing that many kids in one space.
That's what we do.
God bless Chip for bringing out that many.
Or aspire to do. What we're...
Thank you. So this one I have difficulty with, thinking back to the months leading up to the vote on the bond and the conversations we had with people in the community at our public forum where we talked about, yes, this is a school for our high school students, but this is also a major resource for our community. And we said way back then, when we were even reducing the size of the project, we made it a point to emphasize that we're keeping the 750 person capacity for our auditorium. I would have a hard time supporting this, given all of those discussions that we had with people in the community and the commitment that we expressed.
Just to share too, we have had the discussion in our weekly meetings of giving, our opinion on this, that this being such a hard topic. This was from stage one, looking at it, that we have given back to our experts of, we want a more robust discussion on this one, and they could bring every option to the table. Obviously, we're seeing this currently, but what would it look like if it was reduced? What would it look like if we expanded just the first level? So they are working to give us more options, but currently, this is where we'd be at with what we need to cost for reduction strategy.
Yeah, we actually, Mark here did a really quick exercise for us based on your questions and comments relating to that. And I think if we were to expand the first floor, it would probably be more expensive than just keeping what's there now. But one other suggestion to reduce cost would be to remove one structural bay from the second floor and shrink the size of it. So maybe taking out some of the support space and keeping the balcony, pushed back a little bit.
Yeah, we have to figure out how to do that. One of
Yeah.
those, we have to figure it out things, if
Yes.
that becomes a request.
I just want to make sure when we're presenting up here, the community doesn't watch this part on YouTube and say, they're definitely after tonight cutting that whole thing. And, I just want to make sure everybody knows that this is a fluid process and that we're doing everything with our experts to bring the best product forward.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think when you redesign for the gym and put that fitness area in, you're going to change the shape of the building, and that may make it not as expensive as you think to expand that lower floor. I'm actually kind of surprised that you're only saving $500,000 removing that entire area plus the elevator. I mean, elevators are ridiculously expensive. So you do this more than I do. I would have expected this to be like $1 million, taking that out with the elevator and everything else, but I trust you. But yeah, I think we can look at other options, wider, I don't know how many, but if you could squeeze more seats on the bottom, but I can't support going down that many seats. That's just too big of a cut.
So I had a few notes here. I just want to remind everyone, and I 100% agree with Bob, because we had a lot of discussions early in the process. And one of our early designs, one option was to preserve the auditorium that exists and build the building and attach it to the existing. I mean, we looked at a lot of different options because that is a big auditorium. That is a resource that we're losing. And that's a public resource as well. We have a lot of presentation there. We have functions. Like, that is a town resource. So to go down that many seats, I guess I'd want to see what the history of the current use is. Like, do we not use half the auditorium on a regular basis? Like, what's the data support, right? How is it being used now? We use it now when they have a show that's certainly going to come up. Do they typically sell out the current auditorium, right? Because if they're telling them you're going to get half the size, that's a big deal to a theater program. I'll admit my bias. My daughter goes to NK. She's in the theater CTE there, but they run an excellent program. This is about competitiveness. They're happy to be skippers, and they run a really good, tight program. When I go to the Star Awards, SK is one of like maybe 5 municipalities that go to the Star Awards for the state and get awarded at a state level at the PPAC for theater. And so if we want to stay competitive and bring people in and retain, I just don't want to lose sight of that, is that when we make these cuts, part of our goal is to keep kids in district and be competitive with other districts. And I just want to make sure that we're not losing that. The last point I'll make is this. We're planning this facility, but I'm always aware that our neighboring communities are dwindling in their population. And RIDE is pushing the regional school concepts. I'd rather be the school that is the regional school in the future. And if we cut too hard, we may not be able to be that regional school. And so I just want to set the mind, there's multiple factors in this decision. Ultimately, though, again, I'll go back to our charge. We got to build a building that works. If we have to cut costs and there's nothing else on the table, this may be it. So,
And just to give perspective on some usage, just being on the facility side, is with it being a competitive rate that we rent the buildings out, and just there's a custodial charge and a rental charge. We actually have groups, a lot of local groups that use it. The state has used it to come down and do award presentations and to do presentations to our town. But we have groups even coming from out of state now putting in applications to use the high school for events they have that have local theater competitions or cheer or sing, and they want to use our auditorium because there's not a lot of auditorium space available in Rhode Island, from what they tell us. Or to rent out something like the Ryan Center would be crazy cost. So they've been coming to us to say, can we rent your facility, with the proper insurances and everything. So we have had a high usage of outside groups wanting to use that space.
But we're also currently not charging. So like we're at a spot where we are budget neutral on that. Like, so if there are costs that come in and say they want to hire someone to do the lights, they have to pay for that. If they want the fire marshal, because we don't have if we hit a certain capacity, we have to pay for a fire marshal. They do that stuff, but we're not charging at this point in time for people to rent it. So I just want to point that out too, because this is not a significant amount of money in the grand scheme of things. It might be something we could easily recoup just by charging people to use our auditorium, which other communities certainly do.
I appreciate that perspective, Chip. And I agree with everybody who's voiced, especially what Bob said. We came to, basically from the very beginning, our conversation has been around athletics, auditorium, and our educational programs. Specifically with the auditorium, the piece, I think it's important, and while I think it was a great point and call out that our gymnasium would be able to fit our full student body. The auditorium is used by the full student body. It's not just for theater productions, and it's only used upcoming. Shrek the Musical is coming soon in February, not to push it, but it's there. And it is going to be another award-winning performance, and we do deserve to have the facility to support the program that we are offering. And just like our CTE programs, and currently our theater and our music and theater program is not a CTE, but there is a drive for that in the future as attracting students to come in. So we do want to make sure we don't kind of the proverbial cut off our nose to spite our face here, because this is a draw. We have a huge successful program. We just need to come up with $544,000 in order to do it. And does that means we have to give somewhere else, right? So if our recommendation is get this off the table because this is a non-starter, then that's the direction we give. But now we have to find $544,300 somewhere else. So I just want to make sure we keep that in perspective. Like you, Luke, my daughter was one of the cast members and one of the lead vocals in our escape program, and it's a powerful program. It retains students. It will attract students. We want to make sure we maintain it, but we also need to have the ability to fund it properly without digging into other programs. Does anybody else want to weigh in on this before we move to our next topic, which is going to be equally as difficult? Let's go.
So I agree, it's equally as difficult. However, one of the options, if the choral room, so there's a band room and a choral room, these sit right behind the auditorium. So the auditorium is those two pairs of doors going off to the left-hand side. One option would be to design the choral room as an alternate. It means you have to agree to live without it if you can't afford to buy it as an alternate. We do have a variety of other districts that are using their stage platform, as their primary choral space, again, because they have similar issues like you with budget issues. So you could potentially use the platform as your primary choral space for teaching, knowing that you have to move everything out of the way when you need to use it as an actual platform. So the option on the table here is to eliminate it completely, for us to design it as an alternate, or for you to tell us it has to stay. Again, almost $600,000, because this is roof, walls, foundation, a whole edge of the building that would, from a cost estimating point, be gone, as opposed to the last one that we looked at, which is all space within the building, which is a little bit of why it seems like it should cost more. The roof's still there, the walls are still there. It's that component that was inside the building that was removed with the balcony estimating. So.
Yeah, that's not going to go over well. Yeah. And speaking of it, it's sort of tied into everything that we were talking about. Like, while the theater is a separate thing than escape and choral and the band, the reality is that they all feed into it. And if we're looking to attract, retain students, I think what I heard loud and clear was that it's very difficult to teach out of the auditorium. Because of the fact that we have to use it. And it's like, all right, well, that's great. You have full use of it, but then we have a presentation. You're out. Now, where are you going to go? I think it's kind of a necessity. to have it. Does it need to be in that exact spot? Like, does it have to be right next to the band room? I think that's more of a want than, if there was a different spot in the building. It's having it, but you also have to remember too, if it's in a different spot of the building, it's loud.
You still have it.
Yeah. So it just comes down to, I think that's really a need.
One thing I will say about this option as opposed to the theater, when you make the decision about the theater, it's gone. We're not able to add it back in at a later point. The benefit of this choral room where it is it can easily be an addition onto the building as an ad alternate. So it can be designed as a standalone option, which means boosters can fundraise for it throughout, from here on out. And if they're able to hit that target, it's bought as part of the project. So this one does have a little bit of a leg up over the auditorium option in the fact that it doesn't need to be killed right now. It can be added back in.
So for me, the difference between this and the auditorium piece is the auditorium impacts the entire student population and, quite frankly, the community at large. The choral room impacts the music program, a subset of our students, right? Not diminishing it, because it's equally as important as our biology labs, or our chemistry labs, as our second activity space for the gym. So I'm not looking to diminish it, but it's like a subset. It's not a full district community impact the way the auditorium is. That said, it has been absolutely discussed as a need for our program, which is a powerful program, again, that we're looking to retain, enhance, and grow. So again, we have to look at the numbers as far as, is it going to be a CTE program in the future, or is it going to bring students in? Are people going to come to South Kingstown for this program? And are we looking at it as opportunity for growth in the future? Again, this one, it's a tough discussion. There's an absolute need for it. But it is also, kind of to Kate Turner's point, it can be an add-on, and not an addition 10 years from now, but an add-on to the plan if different estimating values are going to go up, down, over and around, and there may be more money available, or fundraising can happen, or however we can handle it. It can be an ad alternate, as opposed to the auditorium would be completely removal or keeping it, if that makes sense.
So two additional things that I would want to say is, number one is, I don't believe we need a choral room that's the same size as the band room. So it may be oversized at that, which I don't know what that does for reductions. But the other thing that, in conversations that I've had, it's sort of think about it from any other thing that we do in the building, and it's like, well, relatively frequently we're going to tell you you have to get out of your space and go find someplace else to teach. So that, to me, is why I had said I kind of see it as a necessity. While it does serve a subset of the population, the reality to me is that you're asking someone who's whoever it is, that is teaching something, to be like, we're going to regularly ask you to go find someplace else to do what you do, and that from that standpoint, that's kind of a big ask.
So hearing Chip, and Kate, are we comfortable telling them to make it an ad alt, but go back and check the program and determine how much square footage we actually need?
Yeah, I had heard the choral room does not need to match the size of the band.
Yeah, so if you guys are able to go back and talk to the choir program and figure out exactly what size we need, and then do it as an ad alt, we'll get some of that $600,000. Does that work? I'm just asking the committee if you guys are good with that. I just want to give direction to them.
I'll ask the question. It's a group question too, because this is also for you. Is there anywhere else in the building, or, because I look at spaces like, this is a very dedicated space for a very limited program, right? How often does choral run in a day? You're not talking every period.
So this room would need to be used for, and we call it the choral room, but it in reality needs to be used for guitar, for piano, for tech theater, things of that. So it's used out of 8 periods. It has at least a 5-period usage.
Okay, so we're talking a
Yeah.
multi-purpose room.
Yeah.
Because my next question was
Yeah.
going to be, is there any other flex space in the building where programming could mesh into that space?
So we often look to the band room as a combination, understanding there's 2 teachers and they both need spaces. So if that's something you'd like us to continue to investigate, we certainly can.
My thinking being, and the difficulty, it is loud, right? So you
Yeah.
have commingling of
And,
noises.
yeah, and to put it in a different spot in the building, then you're soundproofing like crazy and spending money on that. And
Are there other departments that could potentially use it for those vacated 3 periods?
you tell me.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, that I'm
Yeah.
putting that out there.
Yeah.
Like, so maybe that is a way like something else isn't as necessary. Like, if it's a multi-purpose space that primarily serves as choral, is there a way to say, okay, but it's also going to be used for this during these off periods? Something to think about. I don't have an answer at this moment, but I think it certainly is worthy of discussion.
I'm gonna make you hate me right now.
It's
but
not
looking
me.
at this, and Phil, everybody, every expert involved with this. And I'm just gonna throw it out there because we've talked about slab, roof, all that. Crazy idea. Putting it above, going up with it. Does that make any sense? Because then you're
Not
saving-
in this location,
Okay,
because
'cause
then you
it's-
need stairs.
You need stairs.
2, possibly an elevator, because now you've put choral room upstairs by itself. It just happens to be where it is. It's on
Yep.
the far end of the building. In the current
Because there's no
scheme
hall
that-
running down
well,
there.
it's-
Yeah, so
it
there's no
was not
second floor.
contiguous with something else, so you could
Yep.
get there
Yep.
and use the circulation you already have. And to Chip's idea, I'm trying to rack my brain, trying to figure out what other things can we say, well, you can use that space instead of another space. There could be one, I just can't think of what it is right now.
And then my second idea that just popped in again with the space, and again, not trying to create 10 more things for you guys, but if we do find a way to reduce the area of the auditorium, potentially maybe, we said maybe reduce one of those bays. Could we fit
the balcony?
The balcony bay. Yeah, if there's a way to reduce that, but if there'd be any room for choral, to take those storage spaces that were in the balcony section, no, it wouldn't work.
If you wanted a balcony that didn't have fixed seating, you'd bring the seating out. So here's think of this. If the balcony became the choral room, and when you need it as a balcony, you take the risers out and you put in seating that's not fixed. We've seen that as a retrofit to some of the great big auditoriums that are out there in schools that just, are never going to use 1,500 seats, right? That's an option. It's not something we had ever talked with you all about because it wasn't anything that seemed like it was the right conversation to have, but maybe now it is. And to your 100 points, let's have 100 points now because now is when we need them so that we can flush them all out. So don't be shy and you're not hurting our feelings. We don't like any of these either, but it's our job to help you through them. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But that would be a dual-purpose space of the mezzanine. Again, it would be flat, it wouldn't be sloped. Right now, it will be sloped so that you can see, but it has been done. Yeah.
So to Dave, to your point, I think you made a good point, right? We're hearing sort of a common theme. We're good with a reduction or looking at a reduction and trying to salvage it in some way, shape, or form. And you come back, put it back to the architectural team. Just to your point, are we good with that?
Yeah, and then Brian's ideas will also play on the paper. But I do think that if we can reprogram it to a smaller spot, or a smaller square footage, that's going to be huge.
So at this point, we haven't really given distinct direction on any of our points, so we can kind of do that at the end, I think. Does anybody have any more comments that they would like to share on this, particular topic? All right, let's move on to the next.
Okay, this one stabs me in the heart. There was a suggestion that we just squeeze the building in, which we can do. And this would be on the academic, the 3-story academic tower, as we call it. Make the classrooms a little smaller, see if we can take some room out of quarters. The classrooms that get pinched the most when you just look at it as a literal foot off of the building are the corner classrooms. We'd have to go in and wiggle some stuff around to make it work, but I'm not going to tell you that it's not possible. But it potentially puts a little pinch on some of your academic spaces. So I don't have good pros and cons for this one, other than does somebody notice the difference of a foot? Maybe not. We want to make sure we can get the right size furnishings in there, and that students and teachers have enough room to work, move around, make groups, spread out for tests, all those kinds of things. So.
And one item that we tasked SLAM with was we looked at the union contracts for our teachers, looked at the maximum class size, and said as long as you can fit that many students in here, then it's a viable option. If it's smaller than our maximum class size, we can't explore it. So that is something we tasked the architects with as well.
One more item on that, just so you know, we do have to report to RIDE. Their classroom size is suggested at 900, regardless of what kind of class it is. So we just have to write a reason to them as to why our classrooms are smaller. Usually we're writing things like, oh, well, we have learning common space, or we have other spaces that supplement learning in different ways. So we just so you know, we'll need to figure out a way to soften the blow to RIDE. Not impossible.
And what is the current versus the 12? Is it on there, the reduction, what it would make the square footage?
Yeah, can you read it?
It's very small. It depends on the classroom versus the labs. The bio lab in the top left corner is 1,177, reduced to 1,107, so cut by 70 square feet. And classroom number 6, the one on the bottom, was originally 807. We reduced it to 754. Mm-hmm. And those are the biggest hits because they're the corner classrooms. Yeah.
I would have to defer to, obviously, the educational experts sitting in those rooms as before I would have an opinion on that.
I mean, I just want to see what it looks, what it would potentially look like with furniture and storage and so forth. I mean, in a little more detail, before I weigh in on that, because so it's hard to say. I know we had talked about it in previous occasions about well, we might like the touch screens on wheels, but in reality you want to put it on the wall because it takes up less space. So there might be things that we just have to say, you can't have this on the floor. It goes on the wall. It does the exact same thing. You'll get used to it in a few weeks, and then you're fine. So if those things are in place and everything can fit so people can move around and they're not on top of each other, then yes. I mean, I think that's fine. But because it's really more about what the teachers and the kids are doing than it is about the actual space, because they can do that anywhere. They even did it virtually for a period of time, which they don't want to go back to. But the reality is that I'd have to see it on the smallest room, what would it look like with everything in it.
One of the things that we are still trying to do is we haven't been able to find good drawings of the existing buildings. We were trying to find a couple of rooms that you have now to be able to say, it's like this, it's like this, it's like this. So we're still trying to get our hands on some drawings that we can scale and know that we're talking apples to apples. So we will do that and get you some spots to go stand in and say, it'll be like this.
Yeah, and the original building, the classrooms are smaller than they are in the most recent edition, so most of them. So I'd be curious in comparison because some of those rooms are a little bit tighter, but of course we have a lot of older style furniture with the big heavy desks, which are going to take up a lot of space too. So yeah, I'd be curious to see what we come up with.
I had a thought, but I lost it. Does anybody have any thoughts that they want to say before I move along? I wish I could remember. It was a really good one.
I think it would be just because we're talking about the corners, and if we are sticking with that 3 floors, would be the impact and as you were alluding to, that feel, especially being that those are all science rooms, and in many cases, a lot of those are fixed fixtures, and then what the impact of that, of squeezing that subject matter, especially in labs, and if we've got gas and burners and things, and how many students are we talking about in proximity. So I think that not only what does an area of that size feel like, but okay, at a max, we might walk in with a few of us, but then coming in to fix things depending on the activity going on, as well as how many students would be engaged in that activity or could no longer be engaged in that type of activity, is an important consideration as well.
So the thought that I had was flashing back to Broad Rock. When it was built, we went through a lot of these same discussions, and sizes were mooshed. And we have some classrooms that are not real classrooms. They're like little quasi-classrooms, but they're called classrooms, but the spaces are not realistic for ideal teaching. So we do find ourselves in a very precarious place, though. We have $150 million max, right? And we want to keep everything, and we want our robust programs, and we want our and I will have to say that you all did a phenomenal job keeping it reeled in, as far as there's not a whole lot of nice to haves. It's filled with wants and programmatic needs. I tease about the walking track. That's probably the most nice to have. And like you said, Chip, it had a reason behind it. It wasn't just, oh, let's throw a floating walking track in there for fun. So all of this discussion is very difficult because it all has programmatic educational value. It just costs more than we can afford at the moment. And so we are going to have to make really hard decisions. But we all knew this when we signed up for this lovely committee. And we knew that it would have been nice if we could have just walked through it like a breeze with no bending. And we just want to make sure we have one shot to do it, and we want to make sure we are doing it right, and that we don't squeeze our science labs to the point where they're not functioning, or we squeeze our students out of learning spaces. So these are difficult discussions and decisions. Do we have one more big ticket item to go over? No, go ahead. Yep.
It's just a layout question. So you're looking at squeezing one end of the building, and I'm trying to remember the layout, and I know this.
Around.
Right, so the science labs, so you are looking all the way around, because I'm just wondering if we could collapse one side and mush it one way. Let's say these aren't science labs. These are, science labs stay the same, but we actually, again, maybe it's a split the difference type of thing, so.
So that's one of those, again, give us a directive, let us
Okay.
see what we can do with it,
Fair enough.
because to your point, particularly about science labs, there's fixed casework, you can't move it. Other classrooms, we can have things that are movable, that somebody might be able to accommodate things differently. When you tell us these things, we then need to go back and figure out how to internalize them and bring them forward again.
Anybody else on this particular? We have a couple more things and then we can kind of give direction. So
we're primarily out of the inside and talking about the outside now. So our next item is relating to roofing. This is a much smaller ticket, but it's shifting from a section that we had of pitched roofs down to flat roofs. I think the intention of the pitched roofs was really for a solar array. However, we are looking at the efficiency of solar on the flat roof as well, and the suggestion is made that this is probably one of the easier suggestions that we would request for tonight. It's a smaller dollar value, but we can still get a very efficient solar array on the flat roof that's proposed.
What does that look like from a drainage standpoint? Because right now, we tend to get a lot of, we get leaks because of our roof. So what is that?
You don't have solar on your roof now.
No, we don't, but I'm talking
Yeah.
about you're talking about slope to flat now.
So the slope, honestly, was an aesthetic. It wasn't meant to hold solar. The little piece we had. These flat roofs get solar on them all the time. The roof membrane's made
I asked the question poorly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm more concerned about the roof shape, not
Yeah.
the solar part
Okay.
of it. So
Yep.
I'll try again. So my concern is water pooling on the roof and what then transpires after. So
The roof should be designed with, let's take the gym, for instance, a little bit of camber in the steel so that it pitches out and the water's not ponding and going places. That should also be true of some of the other places where we have larger expanses of more flat roof. We're getting it to, there'll probably still be we're looking at putting exterior drains, right? So the water will go to the outside and run down as opposed to interior drains. There's probably going to be a few places where we still need interior drains. It's just too far to get the water to flow. But the roof should be designed so that you don't have ponding. And I know
whether it's flat or sloped, is that accurate?
whether it's flat or sloped, yeah.
And from my experience, where I've seen a lot of those issues is where we have rooftop units. You have a roof drain that's kind of central in the middle of a flat roof. A lot of leaves tend to collect around the basket that covers that roof drain. So it's really more of a maintenance issue. If those roof drains get clogged, that's where you see a lot of those issues happening. Sorry, Brian.
And one of the main reasons we wanted to highlight this is because it has been a topic at our table multiple times. We work really closely with the Sustainability Committee to make sure that we are looking future forward. And we had the discussion already, so we wanted to make sure that we brought it up, that said, yes, if we do change to a flat roof, it's still possible to go forward with a solar array at a later date because the current plans do not include that. So we just want to make that
As
clear.
sort of a matter of course, we ask our structural engineers to, I'll say over-design, it's not the right word, but to accommodate the weight of a potential solar array anywhere on the roofs, because then you have the flexibility of not having to remember, oh, we can only do it over there because the roof is only strong enough over there. It's very easy at the design level for them to just tweak it up that tiny little bit, because it looks like it weighs a lot, but over the course of structure, it really doesn't.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Anybody have any questions on it? All right. And last but not least, here we go.
So this one is a compilation of a variety of items that we identified on the value engineering list, which is why you see all those VE 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 28s. Different components of the outside of the building of how we have it designed now that we can tweak, change, swap out some glass for some masonry, things like that, that will reduce the cost of the outside of the building the way that we currently have it designed. And at the same time, on the next slide, you'll see that there's some of the images that you had looked at before of what you might like the outside of it to look more like. And we can do those two things together in tandem. Look at reducing cost, look at changing the aesthetic a little bit more towards what you might like better. The one thing I will say is that $1 million of exterior materials is a lot. So as we start trying to craft it to look more like what you might like, some of the images I saw had like really nice towers and big tall things. Maybe take towers out of your wish list, or giant expanses of glass all over the place. Because we're looking at $1 million of money that needs to come out. We're not worried about doing this architecturally. All the things that were on those lists, some of them we put them out there ourselves, and we've agreed we can accommodate them. So,
Yeah, Luke, if you want to go to the next slide, it just is a reminder of the 4 top images that the community voted on way back during some of our early community forums, where they expressed there were well over 50, I think, and people voted, and these were the top 4 as far as not necessarily those are the exact looks that we're looking for, but it was more the feel of what we would like to see. I know a big directive was to make it vibe with the existing Hazard building, the Guild, that kind of look, and this building that we're in right now. So to make sure that we honor the vision that we had initially inspired versus, if you want to go back to the previous slide, versus this particular rendering. If you want to talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think this is a lot of words to say. The architects are going back to the drawing board for the exterior. They're taking out glass, they're taking out metal panel, they're introducing some alternate materials like a stone face CMU or a ground face CMU, and they are revisioning the exterior facade. We're asking right now to reduce the amount of glass, increase the amount of brick veneer, introduce some additional materials like a ground face block. That's really what we're asking, but it's a long way of saying the architects need to revision the exterior from what we see in this rendering here.
And just again, to put it out there with being in all these meetings, this is all exterior, it's the building, it's changing building materials, but it's not changing site safety, site technology, anything. We're not touching anything of that. This is all just the exterior look of the building. It'll still be
Purely
the safest
aesthetic.
technological building that we can build.
Purely aesthetic, yes.
Yep.
We're still mandated by RIDE to give you at least a 50-year building. So as far as the integrity of what the materials are, we're not taking them and making them less robust. We're just changing what they are.
Right. No vinyl siding, I promise.
And bonus, it'll be cheaper. Does anybody have any input here for architects at this time? Go ahead.
So I've been a bit of a grinder on this issue, and the reason is, I have a pretty good memory when it comes to long-term. I don't know about short-term, but this goes back to discussions about auditorium, right? We promised the community that they would get something that was worthy of the district they're in, which is, you have the Guild, Peacedale Library, Historic District we talk about. There is a certain level of expectation I think was built, and I believe we have to make good on that. So can we get a building that's less money? Yes. I could build this thing out of CMU block and no windows and make it happen. We can get the programmatic space. The question becomes, to what level do we want that reflective of the character? Now, that may not be as important to the school side as it is to the larger community. But again, I go back to goals and that can't get lost. I do think there is a point where, again, this is a bit of a policy and community issue, that there is a balance point we're going to hit where it's like, this is a pretty good design and may not achieve what was in, these images, right, what the expectation is. Anything above that may have to be weighed in, because it's a financial decision and it's not within budget. So then it becomes more of a council-driven prerogative, right? So I don't see again, I think our core goal here is to build a school building, whatever that looks like. But I am seriously concerned because I know I've seen some projects go wrong where one thing is promised, you put shovels in the ground, it gets built, and there's already an erosion of the trust because what they see is not what you presented. And I will say this, our image during the stage 2 was not this. Was not the towers and everything else. It was a more mid-level design. And so we at least showed that level. So we didn't overpromise, but I've heard others speak to it. I know I'm not the only one, who's speaking to this. And working on projects currently in the community at the Guild, at the library, where we're putting serious investments in. I know it's very near and dear to a lot of people in the community that, these historic buildings not be conflicted with this new structure, where it's like that this is the duck out of water, especially since now it's moving in directly across the street from residents who are going to have to look at this thing every day, and we can't undervalue that either. So I've said my piece, I'll move on.
Anybody else have any comments?
So I'll just add that we're not afraid of this conversation, and we need this conversation in order to understand what are the elements that we need to pull forward. Not to have that conversation now, but every time we listen, like we're listening very intently, what was it that they liked, that they didn't like, where are we going to go with this? So I appreciate it, and don't be shy about telling us stuff. Like, again, it doesn't hurt our feelings. We need the input.
Well, and I would suggest the same thing to any community member who's out there, either physically right now or listening to this or going to listen to this in the future. Please, the same. This isn't personal to Kate Massinanti or Bob Littlefield or Luke Murray. This is your building, and we're trying to do what's right by the community at large. So we need input. If and if it's like, oh, that's ugly. Okay, why?
Yeah,
Give me details, right?
I don't like that. I like
Yeah.
that. Like, okay.
I mean, I will say that I think another component that probably does I think people got used to the image that was originally, like, Phil, that you kind of used as that original look and feel, so that when the new one was demonstrated, it was like, so maybe a hybrid, right? So, something of that nature, but again, I just default back to making sure that it's not in stark contrast to the hazard building that it sits next to, that it's not just like these two don't belong together. That's kind of my default, but I'm one person, and like I said, it's the community's building, so. All right. So we've gone into a lot of question and answering right here and now. I think the biggest takeaway from tonight is we need to give this group direction on a couple things out of the gate, and then there are a couple things that we have to kind of say, we can't give you direction yet. That's what the December 18th meeting is going to be for that final piece. In my mind, the big the geothermal, a decision needs to be made sometime in December, after the December 18th meeting, with the town council and the school committee. I think honestly, from my perspective, however, is I wonder if, and actually, yeah, go to that one, the ground retention ponds. I'm not sure the level of direction that this body can give on that at this stage of the game, or if we need to wait until that December 18th.
I mean, I would suggest at this point, because I don't know if it's really a policy decision, this is an engineering thing and a maintenance thing on the school side, right? I think you need to weigh in, and so I'm comfortable with, and if others are comfortable, giving direction to look at the plan further for one, feasibility, and two, impact. So you come back with a little more refined plan, something tighter that's reality, that we could consider, and what the actual cost reduction is, because it may not be 260. You may come back and say, well, we can get $100,000 of savings by going to something that tips the balance. What do you think? Or you could come back with the full 260, and the school department says there's no way we're going to be able to maintain that, or whatever it is. So,
Yeah, I just want to say, from a priority standpoint from the project team, this is a very important option. Geothermal is a very important option that needs to be discussed and decided on, but the architecture of the building, particularly the interior changes when it comes to the walking track, the choral room, and the auditorium, those are really very time-sensitive decisions that need to be made. Our schedule is really stressed right now. Stretching this into the new year and releasing the architects to enter design development is really going to strain our schedule further. So that, I cannot stress enough the priority to get directive on those options, or at least to give a direction forward to say, yes, make an adjustment with these parameters. We need to be able to release the architects into design development so that they can take this direction and start to come up with solutions and options.
So if I may, if we were to say we have a meeting on the 19th, prospectively we hold that, right? Yeah, I think it's a Thursday, yeah. But that's okay. Would you be able to show us more on this, like what we think a recommended option may look like, so we can actually make a decision maybe at that point, since it is more...
Between now and the 19th? Kathy, you don't need sleep, right?
Yeah, retention versus
Oh,
infiltration.
retention, I'm sorry, I thought you meant all of it.
Specifically,
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So that would be my recommendation, is you come back with more information, show us what's feasible, what the cut is, and then we could probably be more informed to make a decision.
Okay.
So for which ones, though? I know you're talking retention
Just this,
pond.
just
but
retention.
How about the geothermal piece, too?
I think, again, I'll go back, not to keep talking, but this is a council decision, right? This
Well,
is,
that, and
you
that's
know,
what are you saying we need to look at the previous one prior to that meeting? And because to me, both of these decisions, I think, can be hashed out. You guys hash it out prior to the 18th, and then the 19th, we have the joint meeting, and then,
Well, no, I'm sorry, the joint meeting's on the 18th,
Oh.
our individual meeting. So I was saying that this is really a building committee decision,
Ah,
right?
got it.
It's not a visual thing, it's
Gotcha.
an engineering thing, right? Either works or it doesn't, and
Yep.
and it works for maintenance or not.
Okay.
This is more of,
council.
there's incentives that play into this. We have to talk about financing, because this is outside the project budget, right? This is also a policy with regards to sustainability. I don't know if, I'm just suggesting that this is not the body to be weighing in on that.
And I will say at the joint meeting, there will be more information to present. Phil just got these numbers at 3:30 this afternoon that are very high level. So we will have more information to present and can give, if it's 20 wells, we can give you a number that says it's a reduction from 40 wells to 20 wells or to 30 wells or whatever that solution is with the life cycle analysis. So we will have more information on geothermal at the joint meeting as well. And that can be, as you said, a council directive, but we'll at least have more information to give to them at that time as well.
All right, and if you can click through to the next ones. So we have the athletic. I think we're pretty clear, I think, as a group on this one, where move forward with this adjustment and redesign and make it look nice and let the flow happen proper. And the next one, our auditorium balcony. I'm pretty sure it was pretty loud and clear, like not too many people at this table would be behind this, this reduction, but it would, again, we would have to be trying to figure out a way to crunch the budget and make things work. So I would love to hear from the rest of the group as far as do we keep the balcony in there and find other ways to either fund or find other reductions somewhere else. I don't know how we want to proceed on this one, because it was pretty clear that there wasn't an appetite to remove these seats in this balcony.
And there can be parameters to this approval as well. If, I've heard loud and clear, we're not taking the balcony out. But if we can retain the same amount of seats, because a large auditorium was the promise, is there a way that the architects can achieve that creatively, whether we're taking out some of the additional support spaces that are noted up above that are nice to have, are not required by code? Can we shrink that space while retaining the same amount of seats? It would be another potential option if this community is, or this committee is amenable to that.
I think it sounds to me like, if we can find another way and make sure that we have full capacity with the auditorium and the program, I think is a good direction. All right, next, I think is the choral room.
Make a suggestion.
Oh,
on that too.
go right ahead.
I do think this should be also presented to council, because I do think it's a community impact.
Yep.
And so it may come on them also, on their ears, that, if we cut these seats, we could say, we're going to cut, but the larger community could say, wait a minute, non-school people could come into this. So I also think there's some policy and sort of decision-making that needs to happen at that level. And, depending on what our pinch points are in other parts of the project, whether we can afford it or not. I also just, not to prolong this conversation, but we're talking about cutting or engineering cost reductions, whatever you want to call it, right, to a budget that we've set based on an estimate, but you have contingencies. So we don't know with a relative certainty that if, let's say, I'm just going to put an example, we cut the balcony. we go through the project, there is a possibility, that we could get to the project and say, we only spent $145 million, and by the way, we cut the balcony out, and we could have afforded, right?
Yes.
So what we're talking about now is latitude in budget, right? We're talking about getting more latitude in budget if we needed it to afford it. But I just want to be clear with the community, because if that happens, we make a cut, because we have to make a decision now, and we get to the end, we didn't spend out the money, and we ended up making a major impact cut. I just don't want that to come back and us saying, why didn't you? You know,
Yes.
I want to be clear.
Yes, so that is this, as we mentioned before, this is an all or nothing decision. We're making this decision and there's no looking back. I will also say possibility, definitely not probability that we would come in at 145. I wish that were the case. There are contingencies, design and pricing contingencies that take us through, and each stage of design, we are more certain of that cost estimate because the architects have their plans further developed. We're now getting input from trades to verify some of those prices. So as we go, we'll get a better flavor for where we are. And it is a big ask. So we absolutely support the idea of, let's see if we can reduce it while keeping the program. What can we do to save cost, but we can't cut the program? I think that's definitely an important point.
Okay, next. And then again, the choral room. I think it's while is definitely in agreement that is a programmatic need here. I think that, and Chip, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I hear, let's try to value engineer this a little bit more to right size the space and maybe make it a little bit more flexible. Again, to your point before, it doesn't have to match the band space. I don't know what that would look like, right? You'd have like a big band room and then a tiny little choral room. Like, obviously, you're the architects and engineers, you can figure that out. But also, it can be an add alternate. So if we say, okay, we're going to, put a pin in it for now, and then it could be added on at the end. But it's that, like, I don't want to bank on that, because if it's a gamble and we lose, then we lose. It's a big loss.
And I will say from a decision standpoint, we don't need to decide that this is an alternate today. That's a bidding strategy because the architects have already agreed and decided that they will continue forward with the design of this program. But to your point, we're going to ask them to look at additional efficiencies in space.
I would suggest to maybe one of like a Zoom early next week to kind of give guidance to you regarding what parameters would look like, how much space is actually needed. Would that be helpful? Okay, so we can connect tomorrow via email and just figure something out.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I would just agree, especially going back to the re-engineering of the gymnasium and trying to find that space. Since we're not going to bump out, well, then things are going to need to move. Okay, what storage closet can be combined? 3 of them that go away because it's not, certain things aren't going to be attached to programs the way that they used to be, which then allows other spaces to be created as we try to bring something down from the 2nd floor down to the 1st. So things are going to have to be moved around. So what kind of, by moving around the Legos, if you will, or I forget what you called them back when they were the chitlets. As we move those around, what space or opportunities open themselves up for a space that fits the needs of a choral program that isn't as extensive and as we see here as with a band with tubas and drums.
All right, go ahead.
Just a thought. I'm looking at 2 substantially sized instructional spaces, the band room and the chorus room, knowing that there are times during the day where there are classes that need that size space, but then there are other classes that you'd be putting in that space that are smaller, your guitar or the smaller groups. So could we, if we had to eliminate that space, could we get by with a movable divider that is reasonably soundproof, so that when it's band time, you've got a larger space. When it's chorus time, you've got a larger space. When you've got a smaller group, then you can divide it and each can have its own space.
Yeah, that's something that they can look at. It's going to be more difficult to do an alternate that's not kind of a standalone room, I would say, and the architects will have to look into the acoustical study, but absolutely a divisible space is an option.
Okay, thanks.
I just have one question, because from previous lives and projects, what I haven't heard in terms of things that we've looked at, and I'm not sure that this would be the appropriate time, but I need to bring it up, is because I always hear about FF&E being such a huge component, and spending what the cost of a desk new, Verco desk new, versus the same Verco desk that we bought 2 years ago. Have we done that level of value engineering on FF&E as we look? Because the one piece that we're here trying to cut $6 million, and we're like, oh, by accepting all of these, you hit that number. Well, by not accepting them, by not having more of potential cuts, we're forced with these, and we don't know the alternatives of those decisions. So it's almost to the point that if we had 7.5 million of potential cuts here, knowing that we needed to get to 6, we would be able to make decisions more. And so that's just why I'm trying to think of, and as you said, thinking back, when we come back and we built the building for less and we could have had something, have we gone through, is there a reason why we're not looking at some of those other higher cost drivers that are down, or is that just because it's in another stage? So again, FF&E or other price drivers that could be on the table, because if we say right now, or the committee, the council decides, nope, we want that full auditorium, okay, well, it's going to have to come potentially from somewhere, but we don't know what that somewhere is yet.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
where does FF&E fall in that?
So FF&E is a separate budget, I will say. You are 100% right. That is a great opportunity for savings. If there is equipment and furniture or technology that can be reused from the existing building, it will help the budget. It is a different pot of money than that's within that 116, though. But it is possible, if we make a decision that 25 or 50% of the furniture will be reused, we can supplement the construction budget with the furniture budget. So that is absolutely an option.
Can I ask a question on that, though? Because you hit a point there. FF&E is a separate number, right? Which means
Yes.
it's, and the reason you say that, I'm assuming, is because RIDE reimburses that separately. It's a segregated number, correct?
So it is purchased outside of the contract for Gilbane. So the reason that the construction contract, the GMP, is everything that's within Gilbane's scope of work. Furniture and technology equipment are not within their scope of work, so it's separated in the budget perspective.
Okay, so the reason I ask is this. We're not covering the total reimbursement of the project, right? By that I mean we have a $150 million project, but we have about 120, 119 in actual RIDE authorized reimbursement costs. So the town is netting the full cost of the additional, right? So I guess my question goes to, if FF&E is diverted, do we not get the same reimbursement around on just the FF&E? Like if that gets pulled over to the main building, which isn't getting the additional monies, like I guess
Yes.
I don't know if you can answer that now, but I want to be cautious that we don't give up a reimbursement because we started moving money around, because we're not at a project like a traditional project where RIDE authorized 150 million and we're building 150 building. RIDE didn't authorize 150, they authorized 119.
Yeah.
So when we start moving money around, it has implications. So I'm just bringing that up.
Yes, no, that's a great point. I don't have an answer for you on that. We'll have to look into the semantics of how they would support that. They may, but that's a good point.
All right, you guys have enough direction on this particular topic. All right. Next. Squeezing the building. I think.
Yeah, we just want to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Before we can. So when we know that, then we could. If it works, then obviously go ahead. But if it's going to make it very difficult to teach in the spaces, then it doesn't seem like that's worth that savings.
Yes, and the directive that they will be adhering to during that design process is the maximum class size. They do need to ensure that that amount of students can fit within the furniture that's shown, and we will represent those floor plans to make sure this group is comfortable with them before they progress too far into design development.
And I think with internally Chip and myself and superintendent and maybe certain leaders at the high school could be involved, and we have the tools to measure all the rooms, we have tape, we have dividers, so we could even stage part of the current high school, bring it in, and we do have extra space there, so I think that would be good before our next meeting, maybe to stage 1 or 2 rooms and see if the current way science is taught would work. The current way world language is taught, would it fit in the 757 square foot? So I think that we could do that for the next meeting.
We good? All right.
We have the directive to move forward with reducing the size of the classrooms as long as it can still accommodate the programs and is an acceptable layout to the school and the principal.
Yeah, we'd like to see the layout essentially before.
Could I suggest that, again, this is an item that can be back, if possible, brought back on the 19th and shown, so we can get feedback from Chip and actually have a discussion so we can resolve it then?
Yeah, I'll need to talk to SLAM to see what what the feasibility is of coming back on the 19th with those options.
All right. I think this one is still a little fuzzy, so let's move forward, and then we'll circle back. Sloped to flat. I'm assuming that this is we're in agreement that this is move along. All right. And then again with the adjustment of the exterior facade, I think this is another one that just let's proceed forward as recommended here and see what we come up with. Was this the last one? Can we go back to the squeezing the building footprint real quick? Because I felt like Kathy is not feeling comfortable with her lack of direction. So if we can have a little bit more conversation so that they know where to go.
I'm good with the direction, but we're not redesigning between now and next week.
Yep.
So we need to figure out a way for you guys to be comfortable with us doing what we need to do to make it work. But we're not going to have time to redesign the entire tower.
No, I don't think that's what so I want to be clear. I think the thought would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, go tape out spaces, bring Chip and whoever team you would bring in to look at.
So
those
may-
I don't
Maybe-
think I need to see it in physical
Yeah.
spaces. I just mean like drawn out. Like it's like this is what it would look like. With that.
It's a recommendation.
Yeah.
We have a school, right? It's nice to go into a classroom and with some teachers and say,
Yeah, well, Phil said he thinks he's got some drawings we could work with to be able to
I
say
think
it's going to be like
I
this
think it's
room or
gonna
that
be-
room. Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, we're good because Brian, that was kind of Brian's suggestion
Yeah.
was to figure it out, make sure and see, and then go from there. All right, we're good. All right. All right, so that's I believe, unless anybody has any other questions or comments about this part of the presentation, I know we do have Brian on the agenda in our next agenda item, financing and alternative funding opportunities. Are we prepared to move forward with that or? Okay.
And Kate, I just want to remind everybody, until we have the Curtis Corner numbers, a lot of this, we're messing around with $15,000 here and there. It could be a much bigger problem or no problem at all once we get those Curtis Corner numbers.
So
if we're willing to move budget from one side to the other, and that is throwing it out there because it has to be on the table.
Understood. The one thing that I do want to reassure is that we've been pretty clear with Phil. We're not going over 11. Your point being if it's under and we have wiggle room, it changes the discussion on this side of things. Within the next couple of weeks, I mean, we've talked a little bit about, I don't want you to make promises you can't keep. So realistically, a good kind of boundary around when you think you could have some numbers, estimates, ideas when it comes to Curtis Corner.
So I think this committee should seriously consider decoupling the Curtis Corner from the school building. I can tell you that we are going to work to an $11 million budget. From what we have been doing so far, it's unlikely that it will be significantly less than that, to the point where you could move money. I would recommend that Curtis Corner continue on a track where we need time to design and Gilbane will need time to estimate, but that needs to be done outside of the building project and to decouple the two so as to not jeopardize the building project, but also to maximize what we could get at Curtis Corner. And the schedule. So I know I may not have told you what you wanted to hear, but I think that that's important.
Well, it's not what I want to hear. I just want to make sure that we're all clear on what we're doing, because we don't want to get to the end and have money on the table. So if you're seeing things that suggest that 11 million we're going to have to get down to and over here, then that's fine. Just want to make sure that we're not coming in and leaving something on the table.
Yeah, I do not think you're going to leave anything on the table at Curtis Corner. One of the charge was music, academics, and then the athletics. So we certainly will want to make sure you get your full value at Curtis Corner that we can.
All right, are we good on all that? All right. Brian, if you can take us into item number 5, financing on alternative funding opportunities, just open for discussion.
Okay. This is really centered on, at this point in the process, the town has not found a home yet for the PAYGO funding that is available to the town on this project. So this is bringing the PAYGO back into discussion here. So again, pay-as-you-go offering, that's available through the school building authority at the Rhode Island Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The town has been approved for $9,748,398 on this project. How that is arrived at is, the town received, the PAYGO amount is based on the 35% reimbursement, which is the town's base rate, which would be realized by some invoices submitted, which would require invoices, where the town would be eligible for the full amount, the 9.7 million, when we're just under $28 million expended throughout this project. So as expenses are going in right now, say we get an invoice tomorrow for $100, we could submit the $35 to RIDE to pay their $35 portion of that, and the town pay the balance. That is how one mechanism on PAYGO, or we could front the 27 million and then have the 9.7, both options. But it is available to us in full when we are approaching about $28 million on the project. PAYGO funding must be used on school facilities and projects approved by RIDE as part of the district's Stage 2 necessity of school construction submission. So that is obviously the high school project, and also the other programs that were submitted as part of the Stage 2 at other district schools, like the Hazard Building, Broad Rock, Peacedale, Matunic Elementary, and West Kingston Elementary. So the PAYGO is available for any of those options, whether it be the high school or any of those other schools and projects within the Stage 2 application. PAYGO funding is available through June 30th, 2027, must be expended before that time. And PAYGO funds can be used on this project. This will not increase the state aid reimbursements available to the town. That is a very important point that they've hit home to me quite a few times. Obviously, you hear quite often where the town is eligible for 35% or with incentives, say up to 55%. Us spending another $9.7 million via PAYGO on this project does not then grant us another 55% on that. We have a set amount of state aid on this project. These funds, expending them towards the project will not result in any other additional state aid reimbursement. Typically, so it's historically how these funds are typically used by districts. Again, as mentioned previously, the early phases of construction or design, districts use it to pay some of the early costs where they can pay that 35% of it. Districts have also lowered the issuance amount on the bond. So again, where we have $9.7 million, we could issue for just over $140 million if it came in at $150 million. Or we could do expenses on the project like the other area schools or the high school project. So all of these are options to the town on this project. And that was really it on PAYGO.
Just a super quick, like off the top of my head, would the geothermal component, could
Yes.
that be fronted with PAYGO?
Yes.
And then if reimbursements came in from other sources, it could
Yes.
be reimbursed?
Yes.
Does anybody have any, excuse me, and my co-chair, does any,
I'm sorry, just one thing on that, because
Yep.
that was a question I had, because this was, obviously, the PAYGO, it was said it was approved as part of, it can be used for items that were in the stage 2 application. Geothermal was not there. So that was a question I had, and this can be used on the geothermal. It can be used on anything at the high school project. But thank you, that was a point I meant to make as well.
that's a great clarification too,
Yeah.
thank you. So I guess, so we specifically wanted Brian to speak about PAYGO because it's talked about all the time. And sometimes people don't really know what it is. Sometimes people just nod and say they know what it is, but they really don't know what it is or how it can be invoked and how it is. I think you did a very great job bullet pointing. I have a good understanding, but I want to make sure everybody here has a good understanding. So if anybody has any clarifying questions they want to ask at this time, specifically about PAYGO, please do.
So the PAYGO is capped at 35%? Is that what the deal is? It does not, so even if we got up to 55%, this is still only 35%?
Yeah, this amount, that $9.7 million is locked in. We have been approved for that on this project, and that's not changing.
Brian, I'm just going to encapsulate it like a third grader, right? PAYGO is a fancy term for upfront reimbursement, right? For every dollar we spend, we get 35 cents on a dollar for the first up to $9 million.
Correct.
Right? And so that we have to expend more than that to get the money back. Once we have the money, we can do with it as we may, because one thing we didn't mention is the bond legislation was written in a format to not restrict that PAYGO. So this is the most boring and probably the most critical item that we're going to actually deal with, because we just talked about a bunch of things that are not in our scope that the community or the school committee or others may not want to sacrifice. We can build a building within 150. I just want to be clear on that, because we've been having these discussions and we've asked the architect, right, can we get the program in that building? Yes, but it goes to the earlier conversation about we could build it out of a CMU block, we could have no windows, and we could do a lot of things, and when we could cut the auditorium in half, and we could have a school, right? We could meet 150. So there's some other policy type decisions that need to be made, right? Community values and whatnot. This is probably the only money that we could tap to expand the budget in any way, shape, or form, the contingency on that. So I think that's why, Kate and the team here who's been working in the background has said, the council has been asking about PAYGO. Like, how does it work, and when is the right time to talk about it? This is the right time to talk about it, because if it wants to be applied to the bond to drive down the debt, that's a council decision. If there's additional money applied or latitude and contingency that we can get for these other things, then that's a discussion that needs to be had. So this is something that I think Brian's going to bring to the 18th.
Correct.
And try to make the community understand both how it works and what the value decision is. And there's not one right answer. There's a few different options here, but this is the time to make that decision.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, Luke, because it does go to the discussion. So if we go on to the 18th and we say to the council, these are our options around geothermal. This is a situation that we're looking at when it comes to the auditorium. This is some wiggle room that we have, not ideal, not what was intended, but this is our current situation. We don't have to use PAYGO, and we can make these other decisions, and we can try to make things work within, these boundaries, but it opens with a little latitude, but we also want to be cognizant that we do still have other buildings that do still need attention, and we still want to make sure that we're cognizant of all the moving pieces. So I appreciate you sharing that information and you expanding on that. Does anybody have any other clarifying questions or points around this? Or do you have any other funding opportunities that you want to pull out for us?
I didn't get into it in great detail, but the infrastructure bank also does have some low-interest loan programs that the town could take part in as financing options as well. Something else we could look into more in the future as well.
And again, it's just a more robust conversation to have with council. And again, the 18th is a joint meeting between the school committee and the town council. If I'm not mistaken, I don't even know what the original meeting was for. We kind of hijacked the date. It's a joint kickoff to our budget discussions, correct?
It's the initial budget hearing.
Okay, and so this would preface that. So what we're discussing right now is having like we did in the past, having a work session prior to that, or is this going to be an item on that main agenda? Or are we hashing that out now?
I believe it would be on the agenda, correct? Well, we'll have to get that answer. Yeah. I'll talk to the clerk tomorrow.
I just want to make sure like timing and agenda setting goes, like if that meeting was supposed to go 7 to whatever, are we going to start at 6 or is it going to start at 7 and just kind of timing and agenda items set up proper? All right. So that was a lot of discussion, a lot of major items. Before we wrap up and head out to the community comment time, does anybody at this table have any other questions, comments, or concerns that they want to bring up at this moment? We're good. All right. So now we are open for community comment. If anybody out there wants to speak, walk to the podium, just state your name and state your case, I guess.
Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Kenny Burke. I'm with the South Kingstown Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We recently made a quick presentation to the Town Council, and we'd like to officially communicate with the School Building Committee our interest in supporting your work here, your excellent work on this wonderful investment for the high school. Very quickly, the opportunity we see, it's, as you can imagine, it's related to pedestrian activity, bicycle activity surrounding the high school. We see 3 emerging projects that are not directly part of this project, but directly impacted. One of them is a current town-funded project, the paving of Columbia Street. So we're very interested in understanding how this committee is going to look at the paving of Columbia Street, how it interacts with the traffic, both the pedestrian, bicycle traffic, and also considering the school policy, compelling students to walk to school, or if they don't have busing if they're within about a mile from the school. We think that's a very interesting notion, and we'd like you to consider that and at some point just formally comment on it. The other issue is the Rhode Island DOT may be expending some funds on Kingstown Road, Route 108, and I'm not sure of the limits, but we do understand that may be in the vicinity of Old Mountain Field. There's clearly a very strong dynamic between the current and future high school and the use of the Old Mountain Field facilities, not just on a daily basis for students who go out there and recreate, but there's currently a very active use of free parking. And I think that's going to be, again, another interesting dynamic as far as how the school building committee and the town work together with DOT, and they honor the neighborhood where the high school sits. Again, making best uses of available resources, other people's money, specifically DOT and Federal Highway Administration. And lastly, of course, the Town Rec Commission is continuing their investments in Old Mountain Field. So again, knitting together all of these adjacent programs that should be supporting the new high school. We're very interested in supporting this committee and optimizing all of the resources, all the opportunities to, as we say internally, kind of reclaim the neighborhoods and full support of the school and the recreational facilities. So thank you.
Thank you, and that sounds like exciting times for South Kingstown in that area with the roads.
Dawn. Hi, Elizabeth Hoy. I'm back again from the Sustainability Committee. So you knew I'd have something to say. I did want to pass along some information, and I can forward this to the committee if you'd like. But you all heard, and the town council heard from Sarah Ross from Undaunted K-12. So as soon as the new administration came in, Janine and I were on it, and we were like, okay, what does this mean for IRA funding? The answer that we got is nobody knows exactly. Obviously, there has been an indication that we're passing a new tax bill in the first 100 days in office. What Undaunted K-12 seems to think is that that will not be able to go into effect then until January 1st of 2026. And that historically, when there have been tax changes, if there is already a project underway, you have broken ground, they will kind of be grandfathered in under the old prior, whatever the tax law was at the time that you started your project. And the other component was that she also doesn't feel, and Undaunted doesn't feel, that we're looking at a complete IRA, like that we're going to get rid of all of that, because it did have bipartisan support. So whether the component that we're looking at specific for funding, sustainable geothermal, that has the potential in a best case scenario to not be impacted. But if it were impacted, she does think there is a good possibility that we could sneak under because we would have broken ground on our project. I don't have an exact answer whether even just the geothermal test pit is considered breaking ground. I think it sounds more like you have to actually break ground on the high school that you will be heating, cooling, etc. I had also a question as well. I was wondering, for left field, how many of the CHIPS points are you targeting right now? Am I allowed to ask questions? I don't know.
We're less formal than the full committees.
Long story short, we don't have an answer yet. We have not formalized our any chip strategy yet. That'll be something as we're ending schematic design and starting in design development.
Okay.
Do you have a date as to when approximately?
We've been tossing around different dates for the any chips meeting. We've talked about in December, but we're pretty focused on this effort right now. So I think once we start to get directive on this, we'll be able to refocus our efforts on the any chips strategy.
So looking at that any chip strategy, 110 points, we have to meet 110. That's like the baseline to get any of the reimbursement from RIDE. We are up for a 2%, 3%, or 4% bonus if we hit of reimbursement, which is huge. That's millions of dollars. If we hit like 180 to 250 points, which geothermal would get us to. So there's that potential that you have to look at the full picture of not just the $2.8 million. You do have to look at the picture of, can that bring us to the next reimbursement level where it kind of pays for itself. And then if I can take my sustainability hat off for just a moment, I'm going to put on my former SK student and current parent hat. I do just want to make a quick comment that looking at the external, and I get it, the budget boggles my mind. I appreciate all the work. I am not in any way hitting on any of this work. It's fantastic. And I don't want to be the one to have to look at cutting money either. But one of the things that you commented on was reducing glass and increasing, and I just want to say that my memory as a student at SK is how dark that current building is. And if you go into all of our elementary schools and even Broad Rock, they're so dark. So that's just my pitch for please don't get rid of any of the glass, keep the glass. And I'm guessing that anyone else who has graduated from SK also knows it was a dark place. And so anything we can do to reduce that would be great. And then I had one other question. You were talking about the Coral Room as an ad alternate. And so it'd be like, let's say $600,000, and you talked about like fine arts boosters and stuff. What would be the time frame that you would actually, like, let's say the community like rallied and decided like, we are gonna somehow fund this? What's the time frame for that?
So we're looking to go out to bid ideally in the fall of next year. So what that means is that's when we're going to get all of our bid results in, and we're going to work on a contract. Those contractors will hold the bid numbers for a certain period of time after we sign that contract if we want to go forward with it, but they typically don't like to hold their numbers for the duration of the project. So I would say you have a maximum of a year before we need to make that decision, and then we'd probably we'd need to reprice it at that point, and then the numbers would possibly need to go up, and that would also need to be worked within the schedule as well.
So you have 1 year, 1.1 million, go.
No, it was only 600,000, 600,000.
Oh, the choral room and the auditorium. I'm kidding. Maybe I'm not, but just saying.
You'd be surprised. I have worked with many a PTO. They like do some impressive things, but okay, thank you.
How you doing? Don Smith. I came to talk about one thing, and obviously going to have to talk about something else too. And I'm glad that I'm here because I think it could be uplifting. So after a previous life in music education, which I happily retired from now a year and a half ago, here I go again. I was the state advocate for about 10 years, and I was called in on building projects all over the place. Usually when we got to the stage in the building planning that the auditorium was being reduced and the choral room was being cut, like it joined the club, like it's nothing terribly new. It's sad. I think there's some real good possibilities. Almost every choral room is layered, which you would do in the that balcony. Combining that, at least to start, would probably be is brilliant. You need to work out the soundproofing, so that you could still use both facilities at the same time. But I think that's a brilliant solution to that. If the cost cutting comes to that, it sounds like it probably is. For the choral, it's almost impossible to build a world-class program. It's not impossible, but it's almost impossible if you don't have your own room, if you don't have your own space. And once you start sharing the space with the band, then it makes it difficult on everyone, so and to be on the auditorium and share that with the entire school is extremely difficult. So I advise, look into that. I think that's a brilliant solution, and I've seen that work in other districts, at least temporarily until, money's raised. Good luck with that, with adding on for the choral. Okay, I came to talk about ICF, and because I knew that you're going to be talking about geothermal. I'm thrilled to hear that's going to work out. I'm sure the people that were anti-geothermal are thinking, oh, darn, it might work, and it might go away. The one variable you haven't talked about that I think solves all of this is R value. If you increase the R value, I was here in October sometime, I forget the date, and told you I had consulted with all of these places that are successfully building schools with ICF, insulated concrete form. And it creates residential R value, performs around 50, or R50, which is like insane. It cuts your HVAC in half. Exactly in half. And I had asked two of the people who have built buildings with geothermal, how much for 150,000 square foot building, somewhere in there for that. And they said about 100 wells, if it's traditional HVAC. And I said, how much for ICF? They said less than 50. So when we were talking the numbers of 40 and 30 and stuff like that, we're talking more at the 80% level of doing geothermal, which adds on the points, for getting that additional funding. I don't, thank goodness you guys didn't give up on that. That's still alive. The chances of I knew walking into this ICF building some way that Gilbane has never really built before, and I'm not sure where the architects have worked with that either. It's not my life, it's not my livelihood, it's just an idea that I've seen being very successful other places. Why not here? We'd be the first in New England to do that, and I think it's a good thing. And I've seen them benefit from it. So I want to hopefully keep that in mind, that the ICF, it goes up faster. The school would be done quicker with less space required, less cranes. You only need cranes for putting beams in for the joists for the flooring. But I'm talking about just the envelope. And then the envelope would hold in all of that heat so that and cool too, so that, and then it lasts for 300 years. It goes up faster, it lasts longer. It does not look like, here's what I forgot to say the last time, it's concrete, but it doesn't look like CCRI work at all. It looks like the most spectacular building you can imagine now with these building things. It doesn't look like you're imagining with CCRI. It could be anything you want, whatever. It could be spectacular, which is what we're after, for about the same cost. And because when you weigh in less people building it, it's a crew of 8 to 12, put up the walls. There's no cranes with steel. I go by URI and see the Fine Arts Building. It's not going to look like that at all. You just put up the walls and build the scaffolding as you go. And you don't need a lot of extra space because you can do it from footer to footer. So it would be perfect for this if you guys would take that risk. So what is the risk, particularly in Gilbane? And I was thinking that the Gilbane family made arrangements for my son to come in and caddy for them on Newport Country Club. Okay. And they liked him because he would come up with these novel ways of making shots that would work. But talking about risk, which, you're thinking, well, multi-billion-dollar business, but when you're making that golf shot, it feels the same, probably. And they trusted him. So my family has done well for you guys. I'm not trying to make life more difficult. I think it would be something toward the future. All right, I've taken enough of your time. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And I'm assuming the professionals in the room are listening. Thank you.
So I'm Patty Alley. I'm on the town council. The question, my big concern really about geothermal, have been very excited about the prospect of this. And, with the election, I am very concerned about what's going to happen to some of the funding. However, I am cautiously optimistic from what I heard about the person that is potentially being considered for this position. So I guess what I would like is to have a better idea of how whatever incentive programs exist right now for geothermal. And I'm just wondering if we could apply for any of that, like now before January 20th, so that we could get that in motion. And then my other thing is exactly about risk. So I'm risk aversive. I would like to know that it's a pretty good possibility that we're going to be able to reap some benefits from, and we're not going to have to come up with all of the money ourselves. So that's something that I'm going to be looking into to try to understand before the 18th, but any information that we could possibly have about that would be very important, I think. So thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
Doral Beasley. I found tonight's presentation to be deflating. So when this project was sold to us, I believe this is how it was sold. $150 million bond, and then the pay-go money was over and above the 150. So we were being told in the beginning that we had $150 million plus this pay-go money. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So now tonight we started with a presentation that showed that we're going to hold about 11 to $12.5 million for Curtis Corner, and then the high school had been whittled down, $9 million from here and $6 million from here. So now we're down to like 116 and 117. So that's 116 and 117. So let's say Curtis Corner was in total was 13. So now we're up to like $130 million. So here's my first question. What are we going to do with the other $20 million? So we start off now with having a $20 million that we're not spending out of the 150. And then we also have the pay-go, which is like almost another $10 million. So now that's $30 million. So what are you going to do with the $30 million tonight? What are you going to do with it?
Yes, happy to answer that question. So the 116, thank you, I'm loud, but not that loud. 116 million is just the construction cost. That's our GMP with Gilbane. The project also has to cover the cost of furniture, fixtures and equipment, and technology equipment. There's architectural fees, there's pre-construction fees, there's third-party testing agencies, there's a 5% contingency. So it's what we call soft costs. It's anywhere between 20 to 30% of the cost of the project is outside of Gilbane's GMP. So that's where that remaining $20 million comes from. So the 116, just Gilbane cost.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so so now you've whittled it down, but we still have the pay-go money sitting out here available as a contingency, right? Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Hold on. No, I want to clarify that. Right, it's not contingency, right? I just want to go back to an earlier comment too. When we sold the project, we had a number of times presented to council that we don't know how pay-go is going to be used. We never committed to the community it was a contingency. We said we would get a $150 million project. That was the commitment, and we always said this $9 million is out there. Should the council either want to use it in some capacity or pay down the bond?
Can I also follow up? And it was made very clear, if we don't spend it, we lose it by 2027, no?
I would assume if we don't use it, we just lower the issuance amount on the bond when we issue the bond. If it's not
So if
used-
it came to
Yes.
April of 2027
Yes.
and we haven't spent it, we would then take it, to your
We
point,
would just-
and put
yes.
it towards the debt?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, but the word contingency was used for that amount of money when this first started. It was talked about as a contingency. Okay, so it's not anymore. All right, so that's fine. So tonight, we heard about the geothermal thing. Here's what I don't understand. Is the $2.8 million that was showing up there, is that, how many wells would that drill? 40 or 30?
40.
Okay. Now, we were told that for 100%, to build, for the building to be 100% geothermal, was going to take 108 wells, but 50% of it can be done with 40 wells? 30 wells.
I had the same question because
So how's that possible?
because 50% of 100 is not 30,
So how
but
could you
it's-
do 50% for 30 wells, but then it takes another 78 wells to do the other 50? That makes no sense.
Thermodynamics makes no sense.
No, I'm not believing it. I don't believe it, okay? All right, first of all, so I don't believe that part of it. Plus the fact that Mr. Conde did say that he doesn't have all the numbers yet. What I haven't heard is how much money, so if you went to the air chillers scenario and did the entire building with air chillers and no geothermal, that's what I want to, we need to hear a number for that. So heat and cool the building, provide the hot water for the building for using air chillers and no geothermal, and then how about one using 50% geothermal? So I don't know I don't know how these air chillers are even powered. Is it all electricity? We're never going to use any more natural gas. Is this going to be a no natural gas building? Is that what you're telling us tonight? Yes. No natural gas will be burnt for this building. No gas. Okay. Now, the high school up in Massachusetts that I would mention, they use the combination for the academic tower. Those rooms do not need to be heated and cooled 24/7, 365 days a year. When those rooms are not being used, that can be shut down. So for their building in Massachusetts, they use the chiller things to power that part of the building. The rest of the building, the public spaces, all the rest of it, the auditorium, the gymnasium, the media center, everything else in the building was going to be heated and cooled by geothermal. That's what I think you should be going for. So it sounds like you have an idea of how to do it. So why don't we just say that you're going to do the air to chiller part for the academic tower, and everything else is geothermal. Then you don't have. Then we're not talking about 50%, 47%, 60%. You have a fixed part of the building you're going to do one way, and the other part the other way. I would hope you would think about that. Okay, one other thing that came up in the last meeting that I didn't hear anything about tonight was the science labs. So last time we were talking about science labs, they were stacked 3 stories high on one end of the academic tower. And a comment was made that night by one of the teachers at the high school that could be problematic because they kind of share spaces, and some of the same equipment sometimes is used similarly for certain spots. So then when I looked at when I looked at SLAM's website, I saw this building, I think it was Iowa State, that you guys designed, and it had specifically was a science building, a laboratory building, and they had the way they were putting their labs together looked like compact, so maybe you'd be able to put all your labs on 2 floors and keep them more all together, kind of thing, so where you're sharing spaces and stuff like that. I saw that, and that's what I sent to you guys a few days ago, couple 2 weeks, I don't know. I don't know if anybody looked at it. So there's a question is, has that been looked at all? Have you thought about whether or not you're still going to stack the labs on 3 stories, or are you going to see if you can come up with some way of doing it more like what the science teachers wanted? I think I'm pretty close here. I don't think the inflation, we're not going to go back to building, the United States auto companies are not going to go back to building V8 powered gasoline cars. This thing is in motion. This planet cannot survive if we don't do something better. And we're on the right track here, so let's not go off track totally. Let's see. Okay, the last thing is this. The outside of the building. The best rendition of what I would hope this building would look like at some point is the one that Studio J came up with. Their original concept. I liked it because it was mostly brick. Brick's a sustainable material. The thing about the SLAM collaboratives exterior, to me, it's just too much stuff, too many different things. I don't like it. I would question the viability of all those different exterior materials. Whatever we put on the exterior of this building has to last. That's the first thing, okay? It needs to be as long-lasting a material as possible and still look decent. And we're not going to recreate the town hall, the library, the Hazard Building, or any of those great buildings up around the quadrangle in the Kingston campus, because they're all made out of westerly granite, okay? Giant blocks of westerly granite. This building's not going to look like that. So I don't think that should be a goal to make it look like it belongs next to the Hazard Building. I think it needs to look like some version of what we show up there. Those four things that the people looked at. We said those are the ones we like, and let's see how close as we can come to something like that.
Any other community comments?
Sorry, I'm back with one more question. Phil, at the community forum, you promised me that in December you would have an EUI for me. It's December.
You still have 19 days.
All right, we're still working on it. Okay. Coming. All right, my Christmas present? Okay. All right, because I mean, I'm assuming you must have something in mind because that's how you're calculating all of the 40%. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to discussion action, future meeting schedule, and agenda topics. So we have we're planning for the December 18th, 18th for us, 19th for, okay. So I wanna separate, so the week of December 16th, we have a joint meeting between the town council and the school committee on Wednesday, December 18th here, time to be firmed up and determined. We are hopeful to have the architect, engineer, OPM, CM, all the people available for that meeting if possible, and to present to the group. School building committee members welcome to join as attendees. It won't be a formal school building committee meeting, however. And then on the 19th would be our next formal school building committee meeting here, 6 p.m. Do we have, if anyone from the architect, engineer, CM group has any specific agenda items they want to make sure that we hit for the 19th, please let me know. And if anybody at the table wants any topics, again, just send me an email. We are well over time. I appreciate everybody's perspectives here tonight. Doral, I'm sad that you're a little deflated because this is all super exciting, even though there are some things that we have to hash out. I think this is still on par to be an incredible endeavor as we move forward, making some hard choices.
When are we, I just want to be clear. So, when are we meeting again?
Our next school building committee meeting is here on December 19th.
Thursday, December 19th.
Thursday, December 19th.
At 6 o'clock?
At 6 o'clock.
Okay, and that's preceding the...
No, the joint committee is the 18th.
Okay, that's what I was
here
okay. So
at
19th.
Correct, is the formal school building committee meeting. Doral. Do you want my calendar? All right. Does anybody have any more clarifying questions for our meeting schedule? No. And that is our alarm telling us to wrap it up. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn by Bob Littlefield. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned at 8:41. Thank you.